Okay, let's talk about gas tuning. This is a very important concept when it comes to tuning an AR rifle or really any rifle that uses gas to cycle the action. Now, this particular example, this is gas impingement system, which is probably 90 some percent of your ARs. This is AR-10 in this case, AR-15, same concepts, but basically, as you fire, the gas from that shot gets siphoned through the gas port in the barrel into the gas block, back down the gas tube, and that's what cycles your action. Now, the amount of gas and the pressure of that gas are factors that come into play when you're talking about how reliable your ejection is and how reliably your gun works. Now, there's a couple of different things that come into play here. One being the length of your barrel, the other being the length of your gas system. Now, the gas system length is basically ends up being basically the length of your gas tube. So, for example, there's like pistol length where the gas block would be, I don't know, this is just rough estimate. Your gas block would be in here somewhere. Then carbine length, mid length, and rifle length. And then from there, you can even go to rifle plus 1, which means rifle length plus 1 more inch, rifle plus 2. And which one you choose there all depends on the length of your barrel and could even depend a little bit about what you're putting on the end of the thing. Now, in this case, this is a 20-inch barrel and rifle length gas. And that's probably pretty standard. From some outfits, you could probably get maybe a rifle plus 1 or even rifle plus 2 on your for a 20-inch barrel. Rifle plus 2 might be stretching it because you want to have enough gas so that it runs reliably and it doesn't beat your components apart. But if you don't get enough gas, if you have too little gas, it's not going to cycle at all. So there's a lot of different factors that come into play here, and the length of your barrel is actually important and something that some people don't really think about. Now, like I said, this is a 20-inch barrel, and this is a rifle length gas. And the reason that that's important is because the distance between your gas block and the end of your barrel is important for how much gas pressure you actually have. Because the only time you actually get gas pressure into this gas block is when the barrel is basically plugged by the bullet. So if we imagine me firing, the bullet's coming down the barrel, and there's not really much happening inside this gas block until it hits right about here. Right at this spot is when the bullet is plugging the barrel, so the gas that's behind this bullet that's propelling it, it can't get by it. So there's this little hole in the barrel that goes up into the gas block, so the gas can get into there, and that's where it's going to go, path of least resistance, right? So the time that this bullet spends in this portion of the barrel before it exits the muzzle, this is what people refer to as dwell time. So basically, the length of time that it takes the bullet to get from here to here. And the longer that is, you can see that the longer we have gas being forced up into this gas block. Now, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's kind of the simplified version. Basically, it should be pretty clear now that this distance makes a big difference as to how much gas we're getting here. So if this is a 20-inch, if I had a 22-inch barrel, I'd have 2 more inches. So basically, a couple, I don't know what it ends up being, millisecond, a microsecond, I don't know, but a little bit longer time where that gas is actually being forced up this way and back through the action. Now, things get compounded when you add a suppressor on the end, because these things create a lot of back pressure. Like the whole way that it works is it captures the gas that's coming out of the barrel and allows it to slow down before it actually exits the muzzle. Well, as it's capturing that gas, you get a lot of back pressure, meaning the gas is actually forced back down the barrel. So even after, when you add a suppressor on, as far as your gas system is concerned, it's kind of like adding inches to your barrel, because yeah, the gas can get around the bullet now because, you know, the inside diameter of this suppressor is obviously greater than this bullet, so the gas can get around it a little bit, and it's, of course, it's filling the chambers inside of the suppressor, but still the path of least resistance is going to be back down your barrel and into the gas tube. So what ends up happening is you get higher gas volume and higher gas pressure at your gas block just by throwing one of these things on the end. In fact, I had a buddy just recently had an AR-15 in 223, and it was a, let me think if I get this right. It was an 18-inch barrel where I would expect rifle length gas, but instead it had mid-length gas. So it was an 18-inch barrel with mid-length gas. Mid-length is great for 16-inch barrel. 18, you probably want to go to rifle. Anyway, the thing was fine. It shot fine, and it cycled fine until he finally got approved, and he got a suppressor, and he threw a suppressor on the end. And then he had all sorts of reliability problems. He had double feeding, different types of jamming, all because he just added a suppressor on the end. And the problem is that 18-inch barrel with mid-length gas is already probably on the outer edge of being too much gas. And then when you add a suppressor on the end, you're just making that problem worse. So what we had to do to fix that is a couple of things, which we're going to be talking about a little bit more here, but we had to put on an adjustable gas block. She didn't have one at the time, and then we also went to a heavier buffer. And we'll talk about that a little bit. And those, if you look up overgassing with ARs, those are the most common ways of fixing that problem, is either a heavier buffer on this end or an adjustable gas block on this end. I like to do both. So let's talk about buffers. Why is that important in the cycling of this action? Well, so we have here's the lower, and we have the buffer out. So obviously the lower is going to bolt on there, and the buffer will be in here. But I wanted to have it like this so I could show that. Let's see. Let's get back here. Try to show it. So here's my bolt carrier group. Basically, the buffer sits right about here, inside, inside the stock, but it sits basically right at the end of this bolt carrier group when it's in battery. And the weight of this buffer is important, because the heavier this buffer is, the more energy it takes, right, to start moving it backwards. And, of course, there's also a spring in there. The buffer sits inside a spring, and that all gets compressed back into the stock and then comes back forward on recoil. But anyway, the heavier this thing is, the more energy it takes to start moving this thing back. Well, why do we want that? Why do we want a heavier buffer when we're trying to tame recoil, when we're trying to tame down the overgassing issues? Well, when this thing is in battery, the bolt right here is locked into the barrel extension, right? These little guys, the bolt lugs, lock into the barrel extension. And the longer we keep that locked, the more time the gas has to, get out the end of the barrel and, go pretty much anywhere except, back down the gas tube, which is what we're trying to minimize when we're trying to reduce gas. And also, we want the brass case that's inside of this chamber, we want to give that as long as possible to cool off and kind of shrink back down to its normal size. So if we can slow that process down. And if we could keep this bolt in the lock position just a little bit longer, and we're talking, when I say a little bit longer, we're talking probably, I don't know, microseconds, but every little bit helps. Then that gives our brass a little bit longer to cool down, shrink back to normal size, so that when we eject it, it doesn't take as much force to eject it, and it's easier on our brass. We don't need as much gas in the system to have reliable ejection, and just better in all ways. So the way that we can accomplish that is, a couple of ways. One we talked about, the adjustable gas block. So we're controlling the volume of gas that we get back down the gas tube using the adjustable gas block. And then the other method is on the other end here. If we have a heavier buffer sitting against our bolt carrier group, it takes just a little bit more effort, and this thing, the bolt stays locked just a little bit longer, and that allows your brass to be a little bit happier before we rip it out of there and chuck it out on the ground. So, with all that said, let's take a look at what we got here. So this is a standard, this is a rifle length AR-10 buffer, and if we look at it, it's, come on, it's about 5.36 ounces. Now, you could buy heavier buffers, and I have. But another thing that you can do, at least with most buffers, is they come apart, and you could actually replace the buffer weights inside of here. So this is just held in, the end of this thing is just held in with a roll pin. I already pushed that out with a punch and a hammer. So if I just grab this bumper, this is like a rubber bumper. If I grab it and pull that out of there, I should be able to get to the weights. So, see what we got here. So these are just little steel weights, or usually they're steel. Sometimes they can be aluminum or tungsten, depending on the buffer. But you can see we just have a stack of weights inside there, and between each weight and the next weight, and between the last weight and the end of the buffer, we have these little rubber spacers, and that's just to help them when they're banging against each other, because they aren't tight in here. There's I guess I should have showed this first, but they are a little bit loose in there, so they can actually move back and forth inside of the buffer. And there's a whole number of physics reasons for why that's important. I'm not going to get into that. Just know that they slide back and forth in there, and that's why we need these little rubber spacers between them. All right, so we saw that, and in this case, rifle length, I have, let's see, what do I got? 6 of these weights in there. We'll put the spacers on here. So what you can do is you can actually, you can order just heavier buffer weights. So like these are tungsten, and they are much heavier than a steel weight of the same size. So what we can do is we can just replace some of these steel weights with tungsten ones, and we can make our buffer a lot heavier. So in this case, I have 3. I'm going to go with 3 of each. I have 3 other, oh, sorry, I have 4 steel ones on there. I only get 6 total. But I'm going to mix and match, and you can see that I got 3 steel weights, and I got all my spacers in the end and this thing. And then I guess I should put the roll pin on there, because that's going to be part of the system too. But you can see that I am quite a bit heavier now. I was at, what was it, 5.3 something? And now I'm at 7.83, which doesn't sound like a big gain, but you know, percentage wise, it's what, I don't know, Sorry, I had to do some quick math there. It's actually about 45%. So just by swapping out 3 of the steel weights for tungsten ones, I've increased the total buffer weight by 45%. That's pretty good. Just doing a little bit of research. Looks like, some of the heaviest rifle length buffers that you can buy for a 308 or AR-10, that's about 10 ounces. So I'm kind of in the middle there between your standard and, kind of the heaviest that you can go. And I think I'm gonna try that out. Now, you can certainly mix and match these all you want to tune in your rifle to your specific load. You could go with 2 tungsten and 4 steel, or any combination to get whatever weight that you're going for. I'm just going to try half and half and just go with that. So I'm going to get this buffer put back together, and I'm going to throw it in this lower, and then we're going to go out and we're going to do some gas tuning with the adjustable gas block. And there's a lot of videos on how you do this. It's basically you put 1 round in a magazine, and you turn your gas block all the way down, or as far as you can. You shoot that 1 round, and it should the bolt carrier should lock back. If it doesn't, you probably don't have enough gas, so you give it a little bit more gas. Shoot 1 more time until you can get the bolt carrier to lock back on an empty magazine. Once it does that, you probably want to give it another turn and a half, somewhere in there. You need to give it more gas than just minimum lock back on an empty mag, because out in the real world, where it's maybe quite a bit colder than it was when you were doing the tuning, or maybe when your rifle gets dirty, which it's certainly going to do with the suppressor on it, or any number of factors, you want a little bit more gas, just to give you a little bit of wiggle room there and make sure that it's ejecting properly. So that's what I got for gas tuning. I'm going to put everything back together here and go out and shoot this thing a little bit more.